help me welcome to the stage Dr. Bill Crawford.
Thank you. I'm coming over here. I know, right? I snuck up on you, didn't I? Yes. Thank you. Good morning. Isn't it great when you get an applause before you said a word? Wouldn't it be wonderful if every time you walked into a room, people just started applauding? Wouldn't that be great? So, okay, I do have this Ph.D. I am a psychologist, but here's how I like to look at all that. Basically, I read all those books and took all those courses, so you don't have to. My job is to take everything I've learned from my training, from my experience, been doing this about 30 years, from my life experience, been on the planet over 70 years, that's where I got the gray hair, been married twice, the second one going on 33 years, so I got it right the second time, I know, thank you so much. Raising two sons, creating a business. I want to take everything I've learned, all of that, and make it practical, meaningful, useful, something used this afternoon, tonight, tomorrow, at home, at work. In other words, I really, really want this to be about real life. Not a lot of psychobabble or theory or research, real life. Ways that you can become more influential in your life and in the lives of others. Now, I know that you know more about your real life than I do. So even though this is kind of set up as a keynote, we're going to do this for about 3 hours. We'll have a break, by the way. Don't worry about that, around 10. But we're going to be here for a while. So I'd really love to have this be kind of an interactive seminar. So what I'm going to encourage you to do is just notice what questions, comments, concerns kind of pop up in the middle of my presentation, and feel free to ask a question, jump in with a question or a comment. You're going to have to yell, because a long, long time ago, I was a drummer. I started my life as a professional drummer. I think I blew out my hearing when I did that. So if you'll just kind of yell out your thought, your question, your concern, I think we're going to be good. Okay, so basically I've written these 8 books, done these 2 PBS specials. First was on stress, second was on communication. As a result of writing those 2 books, doing those 2 PBS specials, I was asked to do a lot of presentations on stress and then dealing with difficult people. But each time I was doing one of those presentations, something felt like it was missing. I would get to the end of the stress presentation and people would say, whoa, this is cool. How do I use this to deal with difficult people? And I have to say, well, that's in another book, it's in another training. Felt like something was missing. And then I recognized when we're doing a training on dealing with difficult people, as long as we're stressed or frustrated or annoyed or angry, we're not going to be very effective with people. So I've taken everything I've learned from those first 2 books, first 2 PBS specials, put them into my 4th book. You've already heard about it a little bit, called Life from the Top of the Mind. This is a philosophy, a framework, a step-by-step system I've been working on over the last 30 years that is designed to be applied to any aspect of life. When I do my trainings on customer service, I use this material, feedback skills for supervisors. I've got a book on parenting that uses this material called How to Get Kids to Do What You Want. So I really believe this can be applied anywhere. If you like what you hear this morning, we could do a drawing toward the end of my part of the day. Somebody could win a copy of the book. So let me know if that's something you want to do. Cool, okay. All right. Real life. Now, I know people are going to say, what are you doing up here with this flip chart? We can't read that flip chart. It's not for you, it's for me. I want to kind of capture what gets in the way of our clarity, confidence, and creativity. Because I think we're all pretty good with dealing with stress and people in life when things are going well, when, boss is happy and the kids are happy and the spouse is happy and everybody's happy. We're getting all the money we want. We don't really need a seminar for that. I want to talk about those real life aspects that get in the way of our clarity, confidence, and creativity. So I want you to be thinking about what you would like to be able to get better at. What particular type of person or type of situation has gotten in the way of your clarity, confidence, and creativity in the past? And I'm going to get a list of this. There is one problem, however. You may be able to tell this by looking up here. Neither writing nor spelling was required for my degree. Frankly, I had to work really hard. That says problem triggers, problem reactions. I had to work really hard to make it legible. And if I kept writing, it would be embarrassing. I need some help. I need someone who'd be willing to come up here and just write some stuff on the flip chart. You don't have to make it up. All you got to do is write it down. And if you will do that for me, I will let you go to my website and choose any digital product as a thank you gift. All right, let's give this person a hand, ladies and gentlemen. Woohoo! And this nice person volunteered for second. I tell you what, I'll ask you the second time if that works for you, and both of you can win something good. Yeah, come on up here on stage if you would. This person has saved the seminar, basically. We would just be staring at each other, yes. What is your name?
Janie.
Janie, thank you, Janie.
Yes, absolutely.
So Janie, feel free to write down whatever they say. Feel free to add any of your own. You can write kind of big. We just need a sample list.
Okay.
Stressors, triggers, things that have gotten in the way of your clarity, confidence, and creativity in the past. It could be what? Frustration. Now that's how we feel. Let's put that on the reaction side over here. We get frustrated when we do that. Anybody here have kids? Have you noticed kids can be little blessings and little stressors at the same time? So maybe kids/family over here. Ooh, look at how Janie writes. That's amazing. Look at that. Look at the difference between hers and mine. Can you tell? That's why we have these specialists here. Good. So what other kind of triggers have gotten in the way of your success in the past? What kind of people, what kind of situations? Heavy workload. Yeah, all that stuff we got to do. And maybe not having enough time to do everything you want to do. Is that fair to say too? So the heavy workload, and maybe you can put time underneath that. Good. What else? Yes? Bureaucracy. All the red tape, all the hoops you have to jump through, all the forms you have to fill out. Good. I don't know how to spell bureaucracy, so I'm so glad that someone else does. That's really good. What else? Overthinking. Yeah, we kind of start ruminating about this stuff, and especially stuff that maybe we can't always do something about. That's okay. Overthinking. Okay. Yeah, by the way, you're overthinking that. That's right. I believe if somebody can only spell something one way, they're just not being creative enough. Okay, so that's right here. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry? Oppression. Ooh, that's a big one. Yeah, when you don't feel like you're being recognized for who you are. You're being kind of held down or kept down in a way that doesn't allow you to be successful. Good. What else? Time. Did we put that? Yeah, good. Check that. Good. Limited time. Good. What else? Finances. I assume you mean lack of money, by the way, right? Because if anybody here has too much money, we could fix that right here, right now, Don't even need a seminar for that. Lack of money. And why don't we put difficult people down there, right? Because they can kind of get in the way of our clarity, confidence, and creativity. Matter of fact, what are some of the adjectives you would use to describe the difficult people you have encountered in the past? They can be, I'm sorry? Stubborn, yes. And stupid, absolutely. Stupid people. Just get rid of the stupid people, right? Yes, good. What else? Unreasonable. You try to reason with them and they will not listen to you. Excellent, good. I tell you what, we've kind of run out of room here. Let's just do this. Why don't you put deadlines down there at the bottom? Let's just use this as a sample list. If your particular trigger or stressor isn't on this list, just imagine that it is and this will work. So when we're dealing with all this stuff, kids and family, heavy workload, not having enough time, bureaucracy, overthinking things, oppression, not enough money, lack of finances, difficult people, deadlines, deadbeats, in-laws, outlaws, all that stuff. We get stressed, and if you write stress up there under frustration, we also feel what else? I'm sorry? Depressed. Yeah, have you noticed how this can be it can really put a cloud over our head and kind of go around kind of like Eeyore, right? Someone stole my tail, Good, what else? We also, how do we react to this stuff? We feel defeated. That's a good one. Like, man, I'm trying everything and nothing's working and I just don't feel good. Maybe start self-doubt. Is that fair to say sometimes? We start doubting ourselves. Yeah, so self-doubt, good. Where do we go? Angry, that's a good one. Yep, absolutely. What else? Overwhelmed. That is a big one. By the way, here's something you need to know. If you are good at your job, for the rest of your life, you will be asked to do more than you can do. You just need to know that. And what's going on is, because you're so good at your job, they want you to do everything, right? So that's why they ask you to do it. Just make sure we're not always living on other people's demands. That's a good one. Anxiety. So that's a big one. We can get like anxiety attacks, panic attacks sometimes, where it feels like we're dying. Good. What else? Fear. Yep. We can get worried, fear. So fear/worry. And then after that, why don't you just write crazy down there at the bottom, okay? Like drives me crazy, right? And we'll let this list represent any way we found ourselves reacting. Tell me your name again.
Janie.
Janie. Let's give Janie a hand. She did a great job. Yay, Janie. Thank you so much, Janie. Janie, I'm going to recommend you to all my friends, Janie. Matter of fact, we could go on the road. You could be Vanna. This could be a brand new career. And what's your name down here?
Billy Joe.
Billy Joe. Oh, that's a great Southern name. Oh, how you doing, Billy Joe? I love that. Yes, ma'am. I'm from Kilgore, Texas, and frankly, everybody in Kilgore, Texas talks like that. But I learned that if you go out to California and you talk like that, they think you're real stupid, so I had to stop that. But Billy Joe, I love that. Billy Joe, you'll be next when I ask you that. Okay, so again, because I want this to be about real life, just imagine that this list represents any situation that has ever gotten in the way of your clarity, confidence, and creativity. If your particular situation isn't on that list, just imagine that it is. And let's let this list represent any way we have found ourselves reacting to those challenging people or situations. So if your particular reaction isn't on the list, just imagine that it is. So again, dealing with kids and family and a lot of work and not enough time and bureaucracy, overthinking, oppression, not enough money, difficult people, stubborn, stupid, unreasonable, deadlines, deadbeats, in-laws, outlaws. We get frustrated, we get stressed, we get depressed, we feel defeated, we get angry, start to doubt ourselves, we feel overwhelmed, we get anxious, we get worried, we get frightened, and we go crazy. Okay. I think we got real life handled pretty well, don't you? If we could learn to deal with this in a couple of hours, I think our time would be well spent. In order to do that, we've got to understand what's happening here. Obviously, this is the trigger and this is the reaction, so this triggers this. Makes sense. Now, we don't like this, and so we go over here and try to change whatever made us feel angry, stressed, frustrated. Ever try to change kids or difficult people? Have you noticed they don't say thank you for sharing when you try to change them? Or money or oppression. Sometimes there are things going on here that we can't change, which triggers another reaction. But this reaction is more problematic because now there's a sense of frustration there, a sense of powerlessness there. However, because we believe this causes this, we still go over here and still try to change this. We still can't, which triggers another more powerless reaction, and we try to change it and more powerless, and more reaction until something explodes. I call this the cycle of stress, frustration. Now, I'm not here to say we have no right to feel this or that we're wrong for feeling this. You know, as I go around the world teaching this material, stressed, frustrated, depressed, angry, defeated, self-doubt, very understandable. So I'm not saying we have no right to feel this or that we're wrong for feeling this. It's just that people tell me this gets in the way of our clarity, confidence, and creativity. So what I want to do is bring you new information about how to break this cycle, because I think it's the cycle that's the problem. For example, if we just got a little frustrated and we could flip up to clarity, confidence, and creativity, that really wouldn't be a problem. It's getting caught in this cycle. So there's a quote that I love, speaks to the value of new information. It's from Albert Einstein. It says, problems cannot be solved at the same level of awareness that created them. I like that, because I think it speaks to why we might find ourselves trapped in the cycle. We really don't know what's going on here, or we don't know what's going on here in a way that we can do something about it. That's why I always like to start with clarity whenever I'm helping people become more influential in their life and in the lives of others. So today, what I want to do is give you new information, more clarity about what's called the what, the why, and the how. In some ways, we are already more clear about the what. We now know that it's not just that we find ourselves getting frustrated or stressed, but that we get caught in a cycle. Let's talk about the why, or the science behind this. When I was getting my Ph.D., I really got a clear sense that this is what was going on. It wasn't just the fact that we get stressed or frustrated, but that we get caught in a kind of a vicious cycle. And so I wanted to know the science behind it. So I left the psychology department and went to the biology department and took a course called the Biological Basis of Behavior. And in it I learned that everything we think and feel and do and say, how we react to others, how others react to us, all has to do with how the brain processes information. So I've spent the last 30 years of my life creating a system, a philosophy, a framework that shows people how to access their best by accessing a specific part of the brain. I know, right? Pretty cool. And how to avoid the stress, frustration, anxiety, the stuff that gets in the way of our clarity, confidence, and creativity by avoiding a specific part of the brain. Now, the brain can be very complicated. People spend their lives studying the brain, so we're not going to get lost in all this terminology. I want you to think about the brain in three parts, basically a top, a middle, and a lower. So let's look at that and see how this information can help you become more influential in your life versus finding yourself trapped in the cycle. Basically, the lower part of the brain is called the brainstem. You've heard of this. This is where our fight or flight responses are located. It's the part of the brain that regulates our muscle tension, heart rate, blood pressure, breathing, etc. We can just call it the lower brain. Middle brain's called the limbic system. This is where our emotions are triggered for the most part. A lot of people call this the emotional brain. We can just call it the middle brain. Here's what most people don't know about this middle brain, however. And this is what I learned when I took that course. I learned that everything we think and feel and do actually starts here. That this part of the brain acts as a gatekeeper. Or in today's terminology, it acts as a scanner, a processor, and a router. It scans incoming data, processes it or interprets it, and then either routes it down to the lower brain or up to the upper 80% of the brain, the neocortex, what I call the top of the mind, where we have access to our interpersonal skills, our problem-solving skills, our clarity, confidence, creativity, compassion, etc. So again, here's how it all starts, and this is what I didn't know until I took this course. It all starts here. Data comes in from our 5 senses. It is first scanned by the middle brain. Now, if the middle brain doesn't see a problem, got a remote here in my hand, no problem, sends the data on up to the neocortex, brainstem works in the background, regulating breathing, muscle tension, heart rate, blood pressure, everything's fine. But if the middle brain senses anything or anyone it doesn't like, anything or anyone it has determined to be a problem or a trigger or a stressor or a threat of any kind, or anything or anyone that is similar to any problem, trigger, stress, or threat we've ever experienced in the past, it sends the data immediately down to the lower brain, bypassing the neocortex. At this point, the lower brain can only do 2 things: fight or flight, which means blood pressure goes up, muscle tension goes up, heart rate goes up. We get ready to strike out or withdraw, that fight or flight response you've heard so much about. In the latest brain research, this is called downshifting because it happens so quickly. And again, what we need to know is that it bypasses the most intelligent, capable, purposeful part of who we are. Now, in a fight or flight situation, this is exactly what we want to happen. If we're driving down the road and somebody slams on their brakes in front of us, we want to be able to react without thinking. If we have to go, okay, wait a minute, they just slammed on their brakes, we would just hit them by that time, okay? So anytime you need to react without thinking in order to be safe, this is the perfect part of the brain to go to. The problem is we're being thrown down into this old reactive brain in situations where we need access to our best interpersonal skills, problem-solving skills, clarity, confidence, creativity, etc. If you've read any of Daniel Goleman's work on emotional intelligence, he calls this neural hijacking or emotional hijacking. Some people call this amygdala hijacking, a little part of the limbic system called the amygdala. Regardless of what we're calling it, my hope is this is explaining some things. This is what PTSD is all about. This is what panic attacks or anxiety attacks are all about. This is why people make bad decisions. We could call this the science of effective decision making. This is why when you're trying to tell somebody something, you're trying to give them information and they're upset with you, they don't get it because they're not in the part of the brain that can process data. And this isn't just me saying this. People around the country and around the world are recognizing that if we want to have more influence in our life and in the lives of others, we've got to know where it all starts. And we've got to be able to influence that process. So that's what I'm going to show you today. Wouldn't it be cool if after learning what you're going to learn today, going forward, nothing or no one could stress you out, jerk your chain, or rattle your cage? Wouldn't that be nice? That has to do with what part of the brain, because it has to do also with the chemicals we're triggering. Most people don't know this. Blood pressure, muscle tension, heart rate are a series of chemical reactions in our brain and body. Adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol. Cortisol is the big one. You've heard of that. That's the stress hormone. The job of cortisol is to rush throughout our body, shutting down all non-essential systems so that we can go into fight or flight. So it shuts down our immune system, which makes us more susceptible to illness. It shuts down our digestive system. That's where stomach problems come from. It shuts down our production of protein, which is what the brain functions on, and increases our production of glucose. Because in a fight or flight situation, glucose is where we get our energy. But remember, we're not in a fight or flight situation. So when we get trapped in this cycle, we're just sitting here producing more and more and more cortisol and glucose. That's what chronic stress is all about. Shot of cortisol, glucose every once in a while is not that big a deal. But when this becomes a lifestyle for us, it messes with our ability, not only to think clearly, but actually for our body to deal with things in the way we want it to. Plus, this adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol will manifest itself into stress, frustration, anger, resentment, and when we try to deal with life from this lower 20% of the brain, life seems to get worse. When this happens, the middle brain, because see, the middle brain is always searching the environment for any signs of danger. That's its mission. It's to keep us alive as a species. So it has a tendency to scan the environment looking for any signs of danger. Unfortunately, it has a tendency to interpret almost anything negative as dangerous and throws us into the part of the brain that's designed to deal with danger. So now you can see how this external cycle is replicated by this internal cycle. And again, it's not like this happens every once in a while, right? This can become a lifestyle for us, and we can find ourselves trapped in this lower 20% of the brain trying to deal with rather complex personal and interpersonal situations from this very limiting part of the brain. This is especially problematic if we're trapped down here and we're worried about something, and especially if what we're worried about isn't something we can do anything about at the moment. There's a quote I found, or kind of a concept I found on Pinterest that I thought was really cute. It says, 90% of what killed me never happened. And what that speaks to is when we get trapped in this lower 20% of the brain, 85 to 90% of what we worry about really never comes to pass. And yet what we're doing is we're sitting there kind of worrying about it, screwing with our immune system, screwing with our digestive system, really keeping our body from being able to do what it needs to do. Trapped in that lower 20% of the brain. So now we have new information about the what. It's not that just someone triggers a reaction, but that we get caught in a cycle. We have new information about the why, because we're being thrown down into the old reactive brain and we're triggering chemicals that are designed to deal with fight or flight. The rest of the seminar is going to be about the how. I'm going to give you a behavioral model you can do anywhere, anytime, that's going to show you how to shift from the lower brain up into the top of the mind and actually change the chemical makeup of your body from adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol to serotonin and endorphins, chemicals that help you feel better and think clearer. And I call the system life from the top of the mind. It's what I get to go around the world teaching. It's what I'm looking forward to teaching to you today. Pretty cool, huh? Yeah. How do we make this work? All right. So first, let's make sure we understand what we know. I'm going to take everything we've learned so far, put it into one slide. Basically, now we can look at this cycle in a new way. It's not that just someone or situation is triggering a reaction. It's that we're getting caught in this cycle, and that has us getting caught in the lower brain because the middle brain, the limbic system, is interpreting almost anything negative as dangerous and throwing us into the part of the brain that's designed to deal with danger. Unfortunately, if we try to deal with life from this lower brain, that's where we get trapped down here. So what I'm going to show you how to do is reprogram this scanner, processor, router part of the brain, this middle brain, because this is the part of the brain that determines whether we go down to the brainstem or up to the neocortex. Now, here's the problem. All this lower brain stuff is unconscious. We're not doing this on purpose, we just find ourselves doing it. There's a great quote from Carl Jung I love that says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will control your life. But we'll call it fate, we'll call it difficult people, we'll call it time, we'll call it all the things we don't like. See, we don't want these people, these situations controlling our life. So I'm going to show you how to retrain, reprogram this middle part of the brain. Now, in order to retrain and reprogram this part of the brain, we got to be in this part of the brain. So the first thing I'm going to show you is how to shift from the lower brain to the upper brain, change the chemical makeup of your body from adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol to serotonin and endorphins. Then I want to show you how to stay there, how to live there, so you don't find yourself falling back down into the brainstem every time you find yourself dealing with a difficult person or difficult situation. Then, because part of your job is to be influential with people, whether it's at home, at work, I'm going to show you how to get other people to shift from their resistant brain to their receptive brain so they truly hear and understand what you're wanting them to know. Now, most people say, Bill, if you'll just show me how to do number 3, I don't even need number 1 and number 2. Because so many of our issues have to do with people, right? But here's something I want you to consider. You never want to tie your peace of mind to another person's state of mind. That is a recipe for stress, frustration, anxiety. Doesn't mean you don't care. But when you have to change somebody else before you can bring your best to the situation, you've just tied your peace of mind to their state of mind. And have you noticed, when you try to get them to change, they almost always hear that as criticism and sometimes even get worse. So I am going to show you how to get people to shift from their resistant brain to their receptive brain. It's just that we've got to be in this upper 80% of the brain and be able to stay there while they're being difficult in order to pull that off. Then, because I believe this material can be applied to pretty much any situation in life, if we have time toward the end, I want to give you an opportunity to ask any question you want on any subject. How do you get people to buy into your culture? How do you fall asleep and fall back asleep if you happen to wake up in the middle of the night? How do you enjoy foods and desserts without gaining weight? How do you raise respectful, confident, cooperative kids? How do you keep people from jerking your chain? How do you deal with loss and grief? As a psychologist, I help people deal with loss and grief very differently than I do stress. So if that's something you're interested in, please feel free to ask me, or frankly, any other question you want to ask, because I believe this material can be applied to pretty much any situation. All right, we started with this model, clarity, confidence, and creativity. I like it. I call it C cubed. I like it because, number one, we can look here and see there's not a lot of clarity, confidence, and creativity going on when we get trapped in this cycle. So the good news is you're now much more clear about the problem. You know things about the problem that only about 1% of the people on the planet know. 99% of the people on the planet think this makes me this. That will forever trap them in that cycle unless they can change all of this. You now know this is being interpreted by a certain part of my brain. And the stress and frustration and anger that I feel, this is a chemical change in my brain and body based on this middle brain limbic interpretation. That's huge, because I'm going to show you how to change that. Bottom line, a lot of people feel out of control when they find themselves trapped in the cycle and they want to regain control. Frankly, I'm a big fan of regaining control. But most people try to control this so they don't feel this. That ties our peace of mind to their state of mind. We don't want to do that. When I'm talking about regaining control, I'm talking about this upper 80% of the brain, this clear, confident, creative, purposeful brain, regaining control from the reactive brain. The influential brain regaining control from that old reactive brain. Now, the lower brain normally controls heart rate, kind of hard to control. Lower brain normally controls blood pressure, that is certainly hard to control. Lower brain normally controls breathing. That is not hard to control. That's why if you've ever done any stress management or yoga or Tai Chi or mindfulness, breathing is always part of the process. It just has to be done in a certain way in order to be effective. If you don't already have your own model, I would encourage you to use one of these two models, 5x5 or 4-4-4. I like the 4-4-4 model. It's what the Navy SEALs use to regain control. Good enough for them, good enough for me. It's real easy. You just inhale for a count of 4, hold it for a count of 4, and exhale for a count of 4. Easy. Everybody can do that. Or 5x5 is also easy. You just inhale for a count of 5 and exhale for a count of 5. The reason either one of these will work is because it will have you breathing slowly and deeply and purposefully, which means you're coming from the purposeful brain, and you're counting. There's only one part of the brain that can count. If you ever find yourself dealing with someone who's having a panic attack or an anxiety attack and they want you to help them, ask them to count backwards from 100 by 2 or 3. By the time they get to the mid-80s, you're going to notice a change in their demeanor because it requires this part of the brain to regain control from this part of the brain. That's the good news. The bad news is, whenever I get to this part of the seminar, somebody goes, "Oh, Bill, don't tell me to take a deep breath. I hate it when people tell me to take a deep breath because it doesn't change anything." Right? That's especially true if someone has told you, "You just need to take a deep breath and calm down," I tell you, you know. So, I'm not saying this solves all our problems, but remember, if we're trying to regain control, and this is the lower brain normally controls breathing, this will actually begin the process, and here's why. There's the science behind why breathing and Tai Chi and exercise and all of this stuff works. It's called the vagus nerve. It has nothing to do with what we have nerve to do when we're in Vegas, by the way, that's a different thing. But it's called the vagus nerve. It basically is a nerve that goes from the brain down to the body and then from the body back up to the brain. About 30% goes from the brain down to the body, about 70% goes from the body back up to the brain. So when the brain tells the lungs to take a deep breath, the lungs tell the brain to calm down. So that's why breathing is in every kind of situation that you've ever heard that has to do with regaining control. In other words, there's tons of science on this. If you want to Google breathing or anxiety or any of this stuff, you're going to find tons of science, tons of research out there that tells you why this works. The good news is, breathing and using the word relax on the exhale, by the way, the reason you say the word relax on the exhale is normally the lower brain controls muscle tension and normally the lower brain controls breathing. Now you have this upper 80% of the brain literally regaining control by literally taking over two functions, breathing and muscle tension, normally controlled by the lower brain. Good news is, this will take you from bad to better. But here's what I've noticed about most folks. You really don't want to stop at better. You want to be able to bring your best to a situation. So in order to do that, we got to move beyond the breathing and relaxing. Frankly, you can get this on Google. I want to show you something you can't get on Google. I call these the psychological aspects of stress, frustration, anxiety, and there's a lot of them. But the most powerful of these psychological aspects are the power of questions. Questions actually determine what part of the brain we're in. I call them the search engine for the brain. For example, if I were to type a question into this computer and punch send or enter, it would go searching its data banks for the answer. But it wouldn't determine, is this a good question or a bad question or a helpful question or not a helpful question? It would attempt to answer any question we ask. Our brain is the same way. When we ask a question, it doesn't evaluate the quality of the question. It tries to answer any question we ask, and here's the problem. We've been asking BS questions. BS stands for brainstem, by the way, just in case you're worried about that. And maybe something else, like, what is wrong with these people? Or who taught this idiot to drive? Get off the road. What do you think about it? Or, man, why do I have to keep saying the same thing over and over? Why don't people get it the first time? See, those are brainstem questions. They're questions about the problem and the pain of the problem, and they'll throw us into the part of the brain that's designed to deal with pain. So I suggest we take what we've learned and take charge of our own thinking, our own state of mind. We breathe and relax until you feel in control. May take 2 times, may take 5 times, depends on how deeply we are in the cycle. Then if we want the top of the mind to be in charge, this upper 80% of the brain, and questions are powerful, let's make sure we're asking top of the mind questions. Top of the mind questions are questions that can only be asked and answered by this upper 80% of the brain. And they're designed to allow us to regain control and bring some clarity into what's going on here. For example, one of those questions is, was this thought, emotion, or action chosen on purpose? Well, no. We don't get stressed, angry, frustrated, annoyed, whatever on purpose, so that's a no. Next one's a good old Dr. Phil question. How's it working for me, Is this helping me create the life I want, Is this producing the results I want? No, it's kind of understandable, but it's not really working for me. The third one I really love. It goes a little bit deeper. It says, is this the way I want to be defined? See, I think we have to ask ourselves, whenever we find ourselves trapped in this cycle, are we defining who we are? Or are we being defined by the difficult people, difficult situations in our life? Because when we say this makes us this, my kids drive me crazy, these stupid people really make me angry, this overthinking really is frustrating. Whenever we say this makes us this, what we're doing is we're giving the difficult people, difficult situations in our life, the power to define us or control us. I don't think we want these people, these situations to have that kind of power. So if we don't want them to have that kind of power, I think we've got to be willing to take on that power ourselves. So let's do this. Let's shift from a focus on the problem to the solution. This is where I need Billy Joe. Billy Joe, would you come up and help me out here? Let's give Billy Joe a hand. Woohoo! Thank you, Billy Joe. Billy Joe, where are you from? Twin Falls, Idaho. I thought you were going to say someplace like Nashville, Tennessee. That's okay. It's a cute name. I love that. Okay, Billy Joe, if you'll write highest purpose right up here, and then write down whatever they say on this side of the paper. You can write kind of big. So let me ask you. You are the experts in the room. If you were choosing qualities and characteristics that you wanted to be able to access, especially when you're dealing with difficult people, difficult situations, what would they be? If you're choosing qualities and characteristics that, number 1, are more purposeful, number 2, you feel are more effective, and number 3, make a statement about who you are, what would be the qualities and characteristics you would like to be able to draw upon? Patience. Very nice. Good. Yeah, if you would, just write that. Patience, yeah. Understanding. Patience. Understanding. Empathy. understanding, and empathy. You write just as well as this other lovely person. Are you a set? Do you guys work together? I didn't know how that works. Cool. What else? How about, I'm sorry? Compassion, very nice. Now, how about confidence, right? When we're talking to people and we're dealing with situations, kind of self-doubt is one of those things that gets in the way of our clarity, confidence, and creativity. Confidence could be one thing. Good. What else? Kindness, sure, very nice. Confidence, kindness. How about authenticity? So you're not having to fake something. There's a great quote from Sidney Poitier that says, you don't have to become someone you're not to become better than you are. So I'm not trying to change anybody in here to somebody you're not. You all have your own style, your own personality. I just want you to be able to access your best by knowing what part of the brain that comes from. So dealing with difficult people, difficult situations, I would like to be more what? How about influential? Fair to say, yeah, right? It's not about just being nice. Nice is nice, but we also want to be confident and influential. Good. What else? Yes? Calm. Very nice. Calm. Yeah, calm. That's okay. Not a problem. You're having a wonderful time with your friend down there. Calm.
Just checking my spelling.
Oh, that's right. So you don't have to worry about spelling. Remember, if somebody can only spell something one way, they're just not being creative enough, okay? I tell you what. That's a good list. Let's use this as a sample list. Let's give Billy Joe a hand. She did a great job. Yay, Billy Joe. Woohoo! You got some friends here, Billy Joe. Thank you. Okay. So again, what I want you to do is use this as a sample list. That if you were dealing with difficult people, difficult situations in a way that was more purposeful, in a way that you believe is more effective, in a way that makes a statement about who you are, what would be the qualities and characteristics you would choose to be able to access? You said patient, understanding, empathy, compassion, confidence, kindness, authenticity, influential, calm, wonderful concepts. So remember what I said earlier. What would it be like if after learning this material, nothing and no one could stress you out, jerk your chain, rattle your cage? Let me ask you this. What would it be like if after learning this material in the future, you could respond to this like this? Thank you so much. That's okay. Really wasn't fishing for an applause, but I do call that the big reveal. I love that. This is my smoke and mirrors part of this, okay? Now, let me tell you what I'm saying and what I'm not. I'm not necessarily saying that this is right and this is wrong. I'm not saying you shouldn't do this and you should do this. Frankly, I'm not a big fan of the word should. I remember there was a plaque over a toilet where I used to volunteer. It said, "I will not should on myself today." So this is not, you should be more understanding and empathetic. No. This is us saying, if I were choosing qualities and characteristics to deal with the difficult people and difficult situations in my life, I wouldn't choose frustration, stress, depression, defeated, angry, self-doubt, overwhelmed, and anxiety. I would choose qualities and characteristics that look a whole lot like this. See, what we're doing is we're noticing the difference between a reactive brain and a purposeful brain. So I'm not here to tell you this is wrong and this is right. I just want you to know the science behind these two lists. I want you to know what part of the brain this comes from and what part of the brain this comes from, so you can choose the part of the brain you want to feed and engage when you go forward. Plus, I'm also not saying this. All you got to do is be kind and understanding and empathetic with someone, and they'll do whatever you want. We know that's not true. But what it does, being kind and confident and understanding and influential, that puts you in a position of being able to have more influence over the conversation so that you're not being thrown into this lower 20% of the brain. So basically what we're talking about is using these questions to access a certain way of being. So if we look at here and say, hey, am I doing this on purpose? No. Is it really working for me? No. Is this how I want to be defined? No. I love the fourth question. It might be more powerful than all three put together. It says, would I teach this way of being to my child, my children, or someone I love? Man, as a parent, that just bottom lines it for me. But now I'm starting to work with high school kids and college kids and just people who don't have kids. They still love this question. Because frankly, I've yet to meet anyone that would teach someone they love on purpose to be frustrated and stressed and depressed and defeated and angry and overwhelmed. So I'm going to call these questions the 4 criteria, because I think we can use them as a criteria for what we choose. If we find ourselves feeling stressed, angry, frustrated, we can say, wait a minute, am I doing this on purpose? Is this really working for me? Is this the statement I want to make about who I am? Would I teach this to someone I love? I bet you're going to get immediate clarity about that. And then you can use those exact same questions to say, okay, what if I were dealing with this particular person, this particular situation on purpose, in a way that I believe is more effective, in a way that does make the statement I want to make about who I am, and in a way I would teach to someone I love? What would that look like? I've had some people who've seen this seminar before and said, ooh, Bill, I love this, but I need a visual. I said, okay, what if our kids were following us around everywhere we went with a notepad, saying, hey, Mom, Dad, teach me how to deal with difficult people. Teach me how to deal with life. Teach me how to deal with traffic. And we were doing everything we were doing as if our kids were watching and taking notes. See, we would be making very purposeful choices about who we are. I was thinking also it would be really cool if we could develop an app where all you had to do is touch the watch and it would tell you what part of the brain you're in. I thought that would be cool. But in many ways, we don't need an app, because we just got 4 questions that will always tell us what part of the brain we're coming from. Anytime we find ourselves thinking or feeling anything, we can say, wait a minute, am I doing this on purpose? Is it really working for me? Is this how I want to be defined? Would I teach this to someone I love? If you get no, 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 and no, you know we're coming from the lower brain. Then again, we use these exact same questions to say, okay, what if I were dealing with this particular person, this particular challenging situation, in a way that was more purposeful, in a way that I believe is more effective, in a way that does define me the way I want to be defined, and in a way I would teach to someone I love. That has you accessing this clear, confident, creative part of who you are. That's the good news. The bad news is just knowing how we want to be doesn't make us be that way. What we've got to be able to do is imagine being this way in this situation. Let me show you what I mean by that. Everybody humor me for a moment. Take your hand, hold it up to your mouth like this. I know it's weird, but it'll be meaningful. All right. Imagine you have in your hand a lemon. See the bumpy yellow rind of the lemon? Now we slice the lemon in half and there's lemon juice running down your hand. You can see the shiny yellow pulp of the inside of the lemon. If you squeeze the lemon, juice squirts up. Now everybody take a big bite of your lemon. All right, you can put your lemon down now. Did you notice what happened? Saliva, muscle. Some people are going, salt, margarita, help me out here, you know. Some people taste lemon juice. Here's something really important. There is no lemon, okay? But here's what's just dawned. You've just changed the chemical makeup of your body. Whatever happened as a result of imagining biting into that lemon, the saliva, the muscles, that was a chemical change in your body. You have just changed the chemical makeup of your body based not on what you held in your hand, but what you held in your mind and your imagination. That's how powerful our mind is. It will trigger a chemical reaction based on any image we hold in our mind. That's why we have to be a little bit careful of having an argument with someone and going away from that argument going, I can't believe they said that. I should have said this. And then we go tell somebody, you would not believe what so-and-so told me. You know, got to be careful of running that over and over in our mind, because what it does is it triggers those same kind of chemicals that we were triggered while we were in the experience. So what we want to do instead is imagine, all right, who am I when I am patient and confident? Have I ever been patient and confident before? Well, of course. What does that look like? What does that feel like? Who am I when I am understanding and influential? Who am I when I am empathetic and authentic? What does that look like? What does that feel like? Because what we got to be able to do is imagine being this way in this situation. If we can't do it in our mind, there's really no way we're going to be able to pull it off out there. But we control anything that goes on in our mind. So we can imagine being the way we want to be. Once you can imagine being the way you want to be, then I'm going to encourage you to notice a change. Because at this step in the model, you will be feeling more calm, more confident, more in control. Plus the N helps me spell brain. I like my models to spell things. You would not believe how long it took me to make it spell brain, by the way. But I like it because it's really all about understanding how our brain works, understanding how we can begin to have more influence by accessing this clear, confident, creative part of the brain. Questions, comments, concerns about part 1. This is the workshop seminar part of this. If you have one, feel free to let me know. I know it's really hard, right? Because you don't want to stand up. Someone said, I really hate public speaking. Okay, I get it. Okay, if you have one, feel free to jump in, raise your hand, and I'll absolutely go to you. Let's do this. Let me take everything we've learned so far, put it into 4 graphics. It's a map, it's a decision tree. It looks like this. If we're willing to see this, not as how we're being made to feel, but good information about what's going on in the brain, the next time we find ourselves feeling stressed, angry, frustrated, we go, aha, I know what's going on. My lower brain is controlling my reactions and limiting my clarity, confidence, and creativity. See, that's new awareness. Then if we're willing to use our old reactions as a valuable signal that I need to change what part of my brain is in control, of course, if the answer is no, we'll find ourselves trapped in the cycle. But if the answer is yes, you now have a model that spells brain that is designed to show you how to actually change what part of your brain is in control. What do you think? Good stuff? Like it? All right. Oh, that's okay. I don't need a that's all right. I'm just checking to make sure everything's cool, yes. Although it's always great when you get an applause, so feel free to do it. All right. Any questions or concerns about part 1? Oh, by the way, here's something I probably should tell you. I'm going to give you a lot of information today, and it's going to start to feel a little bit too much. So I tell you what I will do. I will do this for you. If you want, after this seminar is over, if some situation comes up and you want my best thoughts about how to handle it, based on whatever you heard today that you liked, going forward, all you got to do is email me, and I will be your consultant for free for life. Now, part of that has to do with it just feels good to me. I really love helping people. Plus, I travel about 175 days a year on the road, which means I spend a lot of time in hotel rooms and airports. I'd much rather be answering emails from you guys than watching CNN, okay? So feel free to do that. Plus, by the way, if you'll notice, there's some cards down on the front of this thing. If you want to come get one of these cards, the cool thing about the top of the card is it is perforated, because I perforate everything, by the way. And on the back of the top of the card are these 4 questions. Am I doing this on purpose? Is it working for me? Is it making the statement I want to make about who I am? Would I teach it to someone I love? If we run out, I'll send you one, but I've tried to get a few. They're kind of up here on the front of the stage. So at the break or later on, if you want to come get one. The card itself has a thing on the bottom that says, would you like to receive Dr. Bill's favorite quotes by email? I have a service that's free where each week I send out one of my favorite quotes along with 2 or 3 paragraphs about how to apply that quote to life. If that's something you would like to get on, there's about 6,000 folks on the list. Every week I send one out. All you got to do is put your email address down here and check yes so that I see I don't spam anybody. I also have a YouTube channel that's got about 400 short videos on there. I post one every week. And so if you want to know how my life from the top of the mind system works with parenting or confidence or leadership or core values or anxiety or any of that kind of stuff, feel free to check that out. Good stuff? All right. Okay, that's okay. All right, so let's move on. We now know how to shift from the lower brain to the upper brain. The model spells brain, so that is designed to do that. It's really about how to have the upper brain, by the way, regain control from that lower brain. Let's talk about how to stay there, how to live there, so we don't find ourselves falling back down into the brainstem every time we find ourselves dealing with a difficult person. By the way, did we mention we were going to have a break at 10? Is it 10? You know, I just noticed as a highly trained psychologist, when people are getting up and walking out of the room, I bet it's time for a break. Let's do this. Let's take a break. Come back in 20 minutes. We'll start with part 2. Good stuff? Enjoying it? All right. Cool. Had a lot of great folks come up during the break and say hello and ask me questions. Most of them were how to deal with other people, by the way. I get it. So what I want to do is make sure we get to part 3 of the seminar, which is how to deal with all these other people. Now, I think it's really important to recognize that unless we are in this clear, confident, creative part of who we are, we're not going to be able to deal with other people. We don't want to make changing them first the solution, because that ties our peace of mind to their state of mind. So hopefully the idea of understanding where our thoughts and our feelings and our reactions come from, either the lower brain or the upper brain, getting really clear a model that actually spells brain, that actually shows us how to shift from the lower brain to the upper brain, access these qualities, characteristics is helpful. Model part 2 is how to stay there. That's what we're going to talk about. This is a little harder. It is, however, designed to fit into any philosophy or any belief system that you already have. Spiritual, religious, Stephen Covey, Peter Senge, Buddhist, whatever it is that you already like that works for you. This is, by the way, excuse me back there, person, it's feeding back just a little bit. Thank you so much. Yeah, you probably can't hear it back there. Thank you. So the idea is for you to be able to fit this into any belief system, any philosophy that works for you. If you're having trouble fitting it into the philosophy that works for you, email me and I will give you my best thoughts on how to do that. So, in order to live in this upper 80% of the brain, we've got to know what only about 1% of the people on the planet know. That it's this middle brain that is the scanner, processor, router part of the brain. It's the part of the brain that determines whether we go down to the brainstem or up to the neocortex. So in order to live in this upper 80% of the brain, we've got to make being in this upper 80% of the brain really, 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 really important. That's why I call it our highest purpose. In my humble opinion, in order for us to get good at this, we've got to make being in this upper 80% of the brain, accessing the best of who we are, one of the most important things in our life, and here's why. Notice these lines going from the middle brain up to the upper 80% of the brain, middle brain down to the lower brain. These are what are called neural pathways in the brain. A neural pathway in the brain isn't just a thought process. It's a hardwired routing of thought, emotion, and behavior. So here's a good example. Let's assume this were a field of grain. If I were to walk through the field of grain once, it would be a little bit hard to find that path. But if I went down that path again and again and again and again, pretty soon that path would become wide, well-worn, easy to find, easy to go down. That's why it's so easy to go from here to here. Because frankly, we've been doing this on some level ever since we're little kids. So we all come to today with some pretty significant neural pathways going from the middle brain down to the lower brain. We don't have to worry about that. We just want to understand the science behind it. The question I love to ask people when they find themselves kind of evaluating their life is this good enough? Is how we find ourselves reacting to life how we want to continue to react? Would we teach it to someone we love? If the answer is, it's just not good enough yet, I want to do it better, I want to teach, it's something that I would teach to someone I love would be better than that, then here's what we want to do. We want to create more neural pathways going from the middle brain to the upper 80% of the brain, the neocortex. So again, using the field of grain analogy, if I decide I no longer want to go down this path, I want to create a new path, well, the first time I went down that path, it would be a little bit hard to find. But if I were persistent and went down that path again and again and again and again, then what would happen is this path would become wide, well-worn, easy to find, easy to go down. In other words, if this is not how you want to be for the rest of your life, you can begin to rewire your brain. You may have heard the phrase neuroplasticity. It means the brain is always rewiring itself. Let's make sure we are influencing how those connections are formed. You may have also heard the phrase, if what fires together wires together. That means the more we practice being a certain way and accessing the best of who we are, that just becomes easier and easier and easier to access. For those of you who have a manual, who downloaded it, you may see these boxes. If you don't have it, feel free to just draw 3 boxes somewhere on your notepad. So that way, we're going to make this personal, by the way. That's why I want you to do this. In the middle box, I just want you to write the word problem triggers. And the box on the far right, I want you to write the word problem reactions. And leave the box on the left blank. Under problem triggers, I want you to write 4 words, difficult people, difficult situations. Or difficult situations, difficult people, either one. Just those 4 words in that middle box under problem triggers. And then later on, this afternoon, tonight, tomorrow, what I'm going to encourage you to do is make a list of your triggers. The more awareness you have of what has triggered you in the past, the less you're going to be taken by surprise going forward. Remember that quote from Albert Einstein, problems cannot be solved at the same level of awareness that created them. We want to know what our triggers are because there are some neural pathways associated with these triggers. And they don't just go away because we decide we don't want to use them. So you making a list of all your old triggers is going to be helpful because now you won't be taken by surprise. On the box on the far right, I want you to write the top 3 responses you've had to your triggers. When you've been dealing with difficult people, difficult situations, what has come up for you the most? I've got stressed, frustrated, angry, self-doubt, annoyed, shut down, overwhelmed, depressed, anxious, worried. You've got frustrated, stressed, depressed, defeated, angry, self-doubt, overwhelmed, anxious, fear, whatever. Just want to write that down so that you know how you have found yourself reacting. Because remember, there is an old neural pathway that goes from here to here, and that's why this is so automatic almost. But here's what I like to do. I like to change the problem into part of the solution. So on the box on the far right, I want you to scratch out the word problem reactions, box on the far right, and write the words valuable signal. Valuable signal. We want to make our stress, our frustration, our anxiety, all a valuable signal about what part of the brain we're in. So we can use that as a way of raising our level of awareness. There's a quote that I really like, mostly because I said it. It says, stress is a signal something needs to change. Suffering is when we don't make the change. So we can take stress, frustration, anxiety, all of this, if we could see this as a valuable signal, something needs to change, kind of like we're driving down the road and a little red light comes on our dashboard. See, that little red light isn't the problem. It's part of the solution. It's there on purpose to let us know something needs our attention. When we pay attention to it and act upon it, things are fine. When we ignore it, things start to break down. So the idea of seeing our stress, our frustration, not as how we're being made to feel by some person or situation, but a valuable signal, a little red light on our dashboard, is one way of us bringing more influence to our life and the lives of others. It changes the signal, the reaction from the problem to part of the solution. Let's change the trigger from the problem to part of the solution. I want you to scratch out the word problem triggers in that middle box and write the words practice field. Practice field. We're going to turn the problem into the practice field. You know, sports teams have a practice field. They go there, they run their offense, their defense, they figure out what the other team's going to do, they practice, so that when they get in the game, they know exactly what to do. We don't have a practice field, but I think life is going to give us plenty of opportunities to practice. I'm also suggesting we're always practicing something, which means we're always reinforcing one of 2 responses. That means we're either going to be practicing this or we're going to be practicing this. I'm going to suggest we don't need to practice this anymore. We're already really good at it, you know? If we ever need to be angry, stressed, or frustrated, we kind of know how to do that. This, however, is going to require some practice. So let's see what you want to practice. On the box on the far left, I want you to write the words highest purpose above that line. And then write down the qualities and characteristics you want to be able to access going forward when you find yourself dealing with difficult people or difficult situations. You've got patient, understanding, empathy, compassion, confidence, kindness, authenticity, influential, calm. I've got clear, confident, empathetic, creative, curious, wise, patient, flexible, open, authentic. The more awareness you have of the qualities and characteristics you want to start bringing to life in the situations that in the past have triggered you, and your ability to use your old reactions as a valuable signal, that's going to go a long way toward you becoming more influential in your experience of life. Let's don't stop there, however. Let's go a little bit deeper. Let's understand the cause. What is this middle brain? If the middle brain is responsible for whether we go down to the lower brain or up to the upper brain, what is it used to determine whether it sends data down to the lower brain or up to the upper brain? I'm going to suggest it's 2 things. Number 1, our past. Anytime we have responded to anyone or anything in the past, especially if the middle brain has interpreted that person or that type of situation as a problem or a danger, it's kind of has a memory of that. The middle brain pays a lot more attention to negative data than it does positive data, because its mission on the planet is to keep us alive as a species, and positive data has no threat involved, but negative data might. So you got to remember, this middle brain is not up to date, it's not very smart, and it's working on old software. So what we want to do is make sure we're not just letting it interpret life in a way that throws us into that lower brain. One of the things we can do to make sure we are more influential in this process is get very clear about what I call our piece of the pie. Our perceptions, our interpretations, our expectations. Because I'm going to suggest it's our perceptions, interpretations, and expectations that actually create our emotions, behavior, and experience. Here's a good example. Let's assume you have someone who is afraid of dogs. She's been afraid of dogs all her life. Maybe she was bitten by a dog when she was young. Maybe her parents taught her to be afraid of dogs, but she believes dogs are dangerous. Second person in the room just loves dogs. She's got about 10 dogs at home. She thinks dogs are God's gift to the universe. You bring a dog into the room. Fact. You got two totally different reactions. The person that believes dogs are dangerous interprets this as a dangerous situation. Expectation is I'm going to be hurt. Emotion is fear. Behavior is I'm out of here. The person that loves dogs goes, a dog. Goes to hug the dog. Her expectation is I get to be licked by the dog. It's great. Here's something important. It's the same dog. Okay, the dog can't be causing the reaction. It's the same dog. What's causing two totally different reactions? One runs away, the other runs toward, are people's perceptions, interpretations, expectations about dogs. So folks, all we got over here is just a bunch of old dogs we've been reacting to in old ways. What we've got to recognize, unfortunately, is that this is a habit. We just didn't start that today. This is kind of hardwired. So what we got to be careful about doing is seeing this as the problem. Here's another way to look at that. If we hold on to the belief that people and life can be annoying and stressful and frustrating and depressing and irritating, we set ourselves up to be annoyed and stressed and frustrated and depressed and irritated. What I'm going to encourage you not to do is define life in terms of its effect on you. Unless you want the effect. If you're reading a book and you want it to be inspiring, that's great. But I would encourage you not to define a difficult person as annoying or frustrating, because we're defining them in terms of their effect on us. So here's what I like to do. There's a gentleman who wrote a book called The Fifth Discipline. It's based on what's called the learning organization. Very cool. One of his disciplines, that he calls it, is suspending our beliefs. I love that concept. We're going to suspend our beliefs. We're going to hold them up and ask some questions. Let's take deadlines. Hey, have I chosen my belief about deadlines on purpose? Is it really working for me? Is it helping me make the statement I want to make about who I am? Would I teach this belief to someone I love? Now, if the answer is yes, 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 and yes, terrific. That's a great belief. I'm going to encourage you to hold on to it, because we all learn some wonderful beliefs growing up. But if the answer is no, 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 and no, I would encourage you to change that belief to one that allows you to access these qualities and characteristics. And one of the ways of doing that is not seeing this as making me feel this, but this is just the trigger. Some of you may remember a gentleman by the name of Albert Ellis. He's called the father of cognitive psychology. He came up with what's called the ABC model. He calls this A for the adverse event, and he calls this C for the consequence. He says the problem that most people have is they believe that A causes C. And he says the good news is A doesn't cause C. A is filtered through B, and B causes C, and B are our beliefs, and now we also know B is our brain. So if we want to have more influence over how we deal with life, because we're going to deal with this for the rest of our life. This is just life, okay? All of this isn't going to change. Well, if we want to be able to access this, we've got to create beliefs that allow us to do that. If you don't want to have to change this belief and this belief and this belief and this belief, if you want to do it all in one fell swoop, here's how you do that. You make this an opportunity to practice this. If we're willing to see life, especially the challenging aspects of life, as a practice field, where we define who we are in a way we would recommend to someone we love, that has us coming from this upper 80% of the brain, if we'll make it important enough, if we'll make it our highest purpose, because it's got to be important enough for us to be able to make it a habit. So, would you like to know how to get really good at this really quickly and keep it from fading? Right, because that's the tough thing. We hear good stuff, and then life happens and we forget it. There is a quote, because I am a lover of quotes, that says, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, therefore, isn't just an act, but a series of purposeful habits. So here is how we create habits in a way that takes what you found valuable today and makes it real in your life. Number one, we can't wait until we're dealing with a difficult person or a difficult situation. By that time, we're already triggered. Here's what you want to do. You want to start at the beginning. You wake up, and before you get out of bed, you ask yourself a question. What's my highest purpose this morning? Just the morning. I know some of the people I'm going to be dealing with, some of the situations I'm going to be in. Who do I want to be? How do I want to be? We go into the morning practicing being that way. Anything we practice, we get good at. Who do I want to be with my family? Who do I want to be driving to work? Who do I want to be when I get to work? Then around lunchtime, you reboot. Very powerful. If I were to reboot this computer, it wouldn't just restart it, it would put everything back where it goes. You do the brain model, you say a prayer, you take a walk outside, you do some deep breathing, you do something that creates a moment of clarity, moment of serenity. Ask yourself a top-of-the-mind question, what's my highest purpose this afternoon? Just the afternoon. I know some of the people I'm going to be dealing with, some of the situations I'm going to be in. Who do I want to be? How do I want to be? And go into the afternoon practicing being that way. Then on the drive home, we reboot. And I think here's where we ask ourselves, I think, a really powerful question. What's my highest purpose this evening? Who do I want to be with the most important people in my life? People that I love the most and love me the most. Because if you're in business, it's real easy to get to work and man, we're putting out this fire and that fire and this fire and that fire. By the time we're driving home, man, there's just nothing left for the most important people in our life. However, if we start the day in the upper 80% of the brain, remember, we're triggering serotonin and endorphins instead of adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol. We don't get as exhausted. If we go into the afternoon in the upper 80% of the brain, we're triggering serotonin and endorphins. I think one of the main reasons that we are exhausted when we're driving home isn't because we've done a lot of physical labor. It's because we've been dumping those stress hormones into our body all day long. And remember what they do. They put us into the fight or flight, which means they tense us up, and we carry that tension all the way through the day. And that's why when we're exhausted driving home. Plus, if you have kids, we know kids don't always do what we say, but they will do what we do. So what I encourage you to do as you're going home is ask yourself the question, how do I want to be? Who do I want to be with my kids? If my kids were taking notes, which of course they are, what do I want them to see? What part of me do I want them to emulate? The reason this will rewire your brain, by the way, rebooting right before you go to sleep is a good idea as well. I'll show you more about that in a minute. The reason this will rewire your brain, if you'll do this every day for 2 to 4 months, you will have rewired your brain at the end of that. It will have now become a new habit. They actually say it only takes 21 days to change a habit. But the idea that we're going to be living this way in this situation in 21 days, that feels a little ambitious. But 2 to 4 months, absolutely. The reason it works is we're doing several things. Number one, we're dividing the day into thirds. So we're only practicing for 3 or 4 hours at a time. It allows us to stay focused. Number two, we are rebooting in the morning, in the afternoon, going home, before we go to sleep, or frankly, anytime you want to. A reboot is just a recognition that I'm in that lower brain, I use the brain model, or I use some way of shifting to that upper 80% of the brain. Plus, we're using life's transitions for clarity. Going from home to work is a transition. Going from morning to afternoon is a transition. Going from afternoon to evening is a transition. Going from one client to another is a transition. So the more we're willing to use those times between times for clarity, so we practice going into situations clear about who we want to be, that's creating and reinforcing new neural pathways. There's a quote that came to me when I was working with a client. It says, it's not just what we feel, but what we feed that creates our experience of life. So if you like what you hear today, just imagine that we're always feeding one of two cycles. We're either going to be feeding this cycle, which is really easy because it's got some habitual components to it, or we can start feeding this upper brain cycle. And the good news is, just like this is habitual, this starts to become habitual. And after a while, you really don't have to think about it that much anymore. It just becomes what you automatically do. Remember, I am available to you to help you take anything you've heard today and translate it into real life. So if you have a question that you don't get to here, feel free to email me and I'll be happy to do that. One of the things I like to do is bring you a map for how to pull this off. So here is what I call the Life from the Top of the Mind System Part 2. It's a map that takes everything we've learned in this Part 2 and puts it all into one kind of decision tree. If we're willing to recognize that every thought, emotion, and action defines who we are, makes a statement about who we are, We want to have some clarity about what that looks like. We want to turn the problem into the practice field. We want to go into life with our highest purpose, defining who I am in a way I would recommend to someone I love, in a way that if it were being videotaped, it could be used as a training film for everyone in my life. Of course, if the answer to that is no, it's not that important, it's not going to work because it's just not important enough. But if the answer is yes, this is that important. We have access to the 4 criteria, we practice all the time, we choose our perspective, our interpretations, our expectations in a purposeful way, start in the morning, reboot around lunchtime, reboot on the drive home. Questions, comments, concerns about part 1 or part 2 that I could address? Yes? Sure, and I'll repeat the question, by the way, yes. So he said, can I share some light into kind of diet and exercise? Number 1, exercise in general triggers endorphins. Exercise is something we do purposefully. It's good for our heart, it's good for our body, it triggers endorphins, it feels good. I'm a big fan of exercising. The problem is when we're dealing with a difficult person, we can't say, wait a minute, I need to go exercise so I can deal with you. Challenge. Diet is, are you eating what you would teach to someone you love? Are you really kind of treating your body in that way? I'm not a big fan of just having to eat one thing. I'm a big fan of enjoying food. I do have an ebook called How to Eat Anything You Want, Anytime You Want, and Never Gain Weight, so it's about that. But the idea is, in some ways, we want to eat what we would teach to someone we love. We don't want, there's a lot of information out there about how certain foods trigger certain things. We want to notice how our body reacts to caffeine or too much cholesterol, too much meat, whatever, because different people's body will react differently. Just want to recognize, is this working for me? Am I doing it in moderation? Would I teach it to someone I love? I wouldn't worry about not eating the right thing because we don't want worry to be the energy of doing the right thing. I would look at how I'm eating and what I'm eating in a way that says I would absolutely teach someone I love to do it this way. I think are going to be fine with that. Then consult a dietitian or a nutritionist that would be really helpful. Thank you. Other questions about part 2 that I can answer? All right, so I know you're eager to get to part 3. How do we get these people to shift from their resistant brain to their receptive brain? I think the first thing we have to recognize is dealing with a difficult person is different than dealing with computer problems or traffic. When someone is in our face, that is a bigger deal. That is a harder thing to deal with. Plus, in the past, when you've been dealing with someone who was stubborn and stupid and unreasonable and argumentative, would it be fair to say that we got a little frustrated and maybe a little stressed and maybe felt defeated and angry and started to doubt ourselves and felt overwhelmed and anxious and crazy? So in other words, in the past, when they did this, we had a tendency to do that. Unfortunately, when they do this and we do that, what do? They get worse. Have you noticed? You know why they get worse? Because they see us as the difficult person. They see our reaction to them as us being the difficult person, and they use that reaction to both justify and intensify their original negative behavior. Unfortunately, in the past, we have had a tendency to respond to that, and they responded to us, and we responded to them. We were caught in a bigger cycle here. I call this banging brainstems. They're in theirs, we're in ours. Nobody's really listening to anybody. We're trying to convince them we're right. They're trying to convince us that they're right. Doesn't work. And have you noticed, when you're in one of these kind of arguments with someone, even when this person leaves the room, have you noticed again, we're still thinking about them. We're running that conversation over and over and over in our mind. And again, we may go to someone and say, you would not believe what so-and-so just told me. Unfortunately, what that is doing is it making them more important than we want them to be. We don't want to have to hold on to anger and resentment because now we know what that does. It throws us into that lower brain, triggers adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol, messes with our immune system, yada, yada, yada. So there's a quote I have about anger and resentment. It says, holding on to anger and resentment is like grasping a hot coal while blaming our misery on the person who started the fire. They started it. Yeah, but we're the one holding on to the hot coal. We're the ones minimizing our effectiveness based on them. So the first thing we need to do is eliminate about 20% of the difficult people in your life. You basically have them killed. No, don't do that. Don't do it. People say, no, I knew this seminar was going to kick into gear pretty soon here, right? No. Don't want to have them killed. Now, there is a quote, because I am a lover of quotes, from Winston Churchill. He says, "You'll never reach your destination if you stop and throw stones at every dog that barks." And what that means is, if you let people who aren't important to you trigger you, drivers on the freeway, some clerk that doesn't give you the service you think you deserve, if you let people you don't know and will probably never see you again trigger you, boy, we're going to be just triggered all the time, because there's way too many barking dogs out there. So what I like to do when I'm doing my Dealing with Difficult People seminar is I like to ask a question. When someone is giving me an example of, say, a driver that, cut them off and then drove slow in the fast lane, and man, it drives me crazy. I say, I get it. And on a scale of 1 to 10, how important do you want that person to be in your life? I think that's a great question when we're dealing with people. How important do I want that person to be in my life? How powerful do I want that person to be in my life? Because if the answer is 0, how do we deal with someone who isn't important? We don't give them a second thought. We don't run them over and over and over in our mind. So what I'm wanting you to do is no longer be triggered by people that you don't know and will never see again, because that will then put you in a better frame of mind to deal with the important people. So let's talk about the important people, your clients, people in your organization, people in your family, people you want to influence. The first thing we have to ask ourselves when we're dealing with one of those people is, what is my purpose with this person? Because in the past, when someone was being difficult and stubborn and stupid and unreasonable and argumentative, what did we want this difficult person to do? Change, right? Stop being so difficult. Some people said, go away, die, do the no. Want them to change. So let me show you something about change. Everybody make a fist as tight as you can. Tight, tight, tight. Now, if someone were to come along and try to force your fist open, what would be your initial response? Tighter, right? I call this the lesson of the fist. I love this guy. Now, I know this guy represents a lot of different memes, but here's how I think of this guy. Whenever I'm dealing with a difficult person, I just assume this little kid's inside going, no, no, no. That way, I don't try to give them data. I don't try to go to a solution. They're not in the part of the brain that can hear any of that. The lesson of the fist says, anytime we try to force someone to change or make them change, they will either resist us or resent us or both, and as a result, become more motivated to defend their position, often a position directly opposed to ours. And now we know the science behind that. Now we know the why, because they're stuck in the lower 20% of the brain. Here's what we need to know about people who are stuck in their brainstem. They will hear almost any suggestion that they change as criticism, and will once again start defending the very behavior you want them to change. Kind of looks like this. They're being stubborn, unreasonable, difficult, insulting, rude. And hey, we're human beings, so in the past we might have found ourselves getting a little stressed, a little frustrated, a little annoyed, a little angry, hey. Now remember, they see us as the difficult person. We see them as the difficult person. If you ever find yourself caught in this kind of conversation in the future, there is a brand new rule I want you to remember. I call it the you stupid idiot rule. The you stupid idiot rule says whenever you're talking with someone, you never want to talk with them in such a way where they could put you stupid idiot on the end of anything you say. Like, no, we can't do it that way. I've told you 5 times. I just don't know any other way of telling you. You stupid idiot. Or it's in the manual. Didn't you read the manual? You stupid idiot. Or with our kids, what were you thinking? How many times have we talked about that? I know. It's okay. Here's the thing. When we talk to people in such a way where they can put you stupid idiot on the end of anything we say, they will put it on there whether we say it or not, and it will drive them deeper into their resistant brain. We don't want them going deeper into their resistant brain. We want them going to their receptive brain. So I've created a model that I call the neuroscience of conflict resolution. You don't have to use this with everyone. If someone comes in and says, hey, I got a problem, and you say, great, do this, and they go do it, you don't need this process. Or if you're talking with someone, you're having a good conversation, don't worry about this. This is the people that aren't listening, they're being stubborn, they're being rude, they're being argumentative. I'm going to show you what I call the 6 blocks or obstacles to effective communication and influence, and an antidote for each one. And when I get to the end of the model, if you have a particular type of difficult person, you would like to see how I would use this model to get them to shift from the resistant brain to the receptive brain, ask me about that and I'll be happy to do that. First block, we've been kind of talking about this a lot, our state of mind. Now we know that if we are angry or stressed or frustrated or annoyed or defensive, we're not going to be effective with people because we now are stuck in this lower 20% of the brain, which means we do not have access to the kind of interpersonal skills and problem-solving skills that reside in the upper 80% of the brain. Plus our frustration, our anger, our resentment, our annoyance will leak into our nonverbals. They will interpret that as criticism, and they will hear "you stupid idiot" on the end of pretty much anything we say. That's why we've been spending so much time understanding the neuroscience of why we find ourselves trapped in the cycle, how to shift to the top of the mind and how to stay there. One of the things when I'm in the book, when I get to this part of the model, I say, okay, put the book down and go practice this for a little bit, because we want to be able to do this in order to be able to do it while we're talking to people. Also, here's one of the things I would not encourage you to do. While I am going to show you how to get people to shift from the lower brain to the upper brain, I would encourage you not to go out and try this on the most difficult person in your life, okay? Start with little annoying people and work your way up, all right? There's a new science about how our brains interact with each other. It's called interpersonal neurobiology. And what it means is if we're not careful, our brainstem will drive them into theirs, or theirs will drive us into ours. So, remember that quote from Albert Einstein, problems cannot be solved at the same level of awareness that created them. The first thing we've always got to know before we go into any situation where we want to be more effective is, what's my highest purpose? I want to make sure I'm being purposeful. I want to make sure I'm being effective. I want to make sure I'm dealing with this situation in a way that defines me and in a way I would teach to someone I love. As if my kids were watching me, I would want them to take notes and emulate what I saw them doing. In other words, we've got to take a lot of responsibility for the qualities and characteristics we bring to the conversation. We don't want to tie our peace of mind to their state of mind. So we want to be very clear about who I want to be and how I want to be going into the situation. That's the antidote to the lower state of mind. Next block, our trying to stop their negative behavior or defend our position. Often when we're dealing with a difficult person, all we see is their difficult behavior. And often we're trying to convince them they should stop that difficult behavior. Have you noticed they don't say, "Thank you for sharing, what a wonderful idea." They start defending the very behavior we're trying to get them to stop. So in addition to knowing what we want to bring, we got to ask ourselves another question. What do I want to bring out? See, if you can begin to look at people at, okay, this is who they are when they're coming from the lower brain, who are they when they're coming from the upper 80% of the brain? Do they do anything well if they're part of your organization? Do they do anything well? If so, that's who they are when they're coming from that upper 80% of the brain. If they're part of your family, what do they just love to do? What do they just get lost in? What you want to do is not paint their entire being with this difficult person brush. And that's what our middle brain will have a tendency to do. It will have a tendency to only see their negative behavior. That's why I love this quote for those of you who are wanting to be more influential with people. True vision is the ability to see in another more than they are showing you. Don't get fooled by the mask. This is a mask of fear and insecurity. They're afraid you don't like them. They're afraid you're not going to listen to them. They're afraid you're going to tell them they're wrong. They're afraid you're going to fire them. They're afraid you're going to punish them. They're afraid you're going to argue with them. That's why I like to see difficult people as frightened versus frightening, or frightened versus annoying. I don't mean frightened in the typical sense of like this, but they're coming from the fear-based part of the brain. Because when I can see them as that, I can ask myself the question, okay, who are they when they're coming from the upper 80% of the brain? Because that's the part of them that I'm going to be able to create a solution-focused conversation with a little bit later in the model. Or at the very least, that's the part of them that is the rational part of the brain that will actually have us making rational decisions and coming to a understanding. Next block. They have a belief, they have a concern, they have a worry. There's something that's important to this person. And have you noticed they think they're right about whatever they're saying? Have you noticed that? So let's assume we got two people, and these two people are represented by these two cups, us and them. And let's assume this represents the facts, crystal clear. Most people think that everybody sees the facts the same way. We now know that's not the case, and we know why. Our limbic system colors how we see the facts. Some people see the facts one way, other people see the facts another way. Same facts, different interpretation, different perspective. So now we have these two different perspectives. This is our perspective, pretty blue perspective. Their perspective looks like piss. That's all there is to it. Which means we have a tendency to go into most situations pretty clear about the righteousness of what we believe. And often we start trying to convince someone they should not be yellow, they should be blue. If they hear us trying to convince them they should not be yellow, they should be blue, they start arguing for the validity of yellow. We don't want them arguing for the validity of yellow. We want them open to our influence, open to our ideas. How can we do that? Well, the first thing I'm sure you've heard, if you've taken any kind of interpersonal course, everybody talks about the importance of listening. I'm going to encourage you to take that one step further based on what we've learned today. I'm going to encourage you to listen and learn, number one, what part of the brain are they coming from? Because if they're stuck in the brainstem, you don't want to try to give them data. You don't want to try to go to a solution. Please don't tell them to calm down. There's a quote that says, never in the history of calming down has anyone ever actually calmed down after being told to calm down. Calm down, don't tell me to calm down. See, what we want to do is make sure we understand what is in the way of them hearing us. So what we want to do is find out what this is. We don't have to agree with it, but we have to know what it is. If you want to be influential with someone, you got to know what is influencing them. Plus, if this is already influencing them, if we could start there, we would be starting at the place that they're being influenced by. In other words, we wouldn't have to convince them they're wrong. We start by understanding this, getting what this is. How do we get this, what this is? Well, we could ask them, hey, help me understand what's important to you here. What am I missing here? Help me understand what you want me to know about that. Changes the color of the interaction. They now see us not as someone who's trying to change them, but someone who's interested in what's important to them. Plus, when you ask someone, hey, help me understand what's important to you, most people go, well, I'm so glad you asked. It's this and this and this and this. Now, we have information we didn't have before. We've always known our ideas. Now we know their ideas. And what we've just done is we've created what Stephen Covey calls the third alternative, combination of what's important to us with what's important to them. It puts us in a very powerful position to begin to blend these two a little bit later on in the model if we're willing to listen. But here's the problem with listening. Most of us grew up with listening being the less powerful perspective. When we were little kids and our parents talked to us, we were supposed to listen. So we grew up believing that powerful people talk and less powerful people listen. And so we have a tendency, we feel listening is passive and it's almost like they're winning and they're not listening to us, and we have a tendency to want to kind of talk over what's going on. There's a quote I love because I'm a lover of quotes that says, wisdom is the reward we get. For listening all of those times we would have preferred to talk. And the wisdom we get is we learn what's in the way of them hearing us. We learn what's important to them, and that can be a very powerful tool in getting them to hear us. Next block, their fear that we don't get it. Have you ever been talking to someone and you could just tell by the way they were talking to you, they didn't get it? Did you notice you weren't really eager to hear what they said next because we didn't think they understood the situation in the first place, right? If they think we don't get it, they're not going to be open to, certainly eager to hear what we say next. And that's what we want them to do. We want them to be open to, hopefully even eager to hear what we say next. So here's where empathizing comes in. I know you've heard this over and over and over. Let me tell you why it's important. Most people come to you thinking they have to convince you of their right to think and feel what they think and feel. So they're not really open to hearing what you have to say. They're trying to convince you that they're right. Empathizing frees them from the need to convince you that they have a right to think and feel what they think and feel. Here's a good example. Let's assume someone burst into the room and looked at me and said, Bill, I believe Martians are controlling our brainwaves. And if I went, no, they're not. Yes, they are. Now we would be in an argument about whether Martians are controlling our brainwaves. But if I said something like, whoa, I can see how you'd be concerned about that. I can see how that would be important to you. See, I wouldn't be saying that I believe Martians are controlling our brainwaves. What I've just told that person is they no longer have to defend their right to think and feel what they think and feel. So empathizing takes about 2 seconds. All you have to do is say something like, I can see how you'd see it that way. I can see how that would be important to you. If they're not making any sense, now you can really see how they would be doing that because they're coming from the part of the brain that doesn't make sense. So you could authentically say, I can see how that would be important to you. And what you'll notice is people go, oh, well, okay. But now they're more open to what happens next. Here's what we need to know about people who are being defensive. They're not just defending their position, they're defending themselves. They're defending their judgment. Has anybody ever had a conversation around the dinner table about politics lately? Have you noticed how people get so, man, it's Hillary, no, it's Trump, they seem to passionate about it. Frankly, it's not about Hillary or Trump. It's about their judgment. If you try to tell someone in your family that you do not like their choice of partners, they are not going to say thank you for sharing because they don't hear you talking about their partner. They hear you talking about their judgment. So what you don't want to do is get someone defending their right to think and feel what they think and feel because that has them not open. Now, a lot of people are concerned, wait a minute, if I'm just listening and empathizing, wait a minute, when do I get to say what I want to say, all right? How is this too passive? Are people going to walk all over me? There is a martial art that I've become familiar with recently. It's called Aikido. And the beautiful thing about Aikido, it's not about winning, it's about resolving conflict. So I found this on the web. What I'm about to show you isn't my thoughts or words. This is what Aikido is described on the web. Take a look at this slide, read it through, and I think you'll find it interesting. When I found that, I went, ooh, how cool. Because what we're talking about here isn't being walked over by people, isn't a passive experience. Aikido says that when someone throws a punch, you actually step into that and you use that energy to influence where the conversation goes. The last line I love, Aikido is a unique blend of power and grace. That's why I love when you were talking about qualities and characteristics, you talk about patient understanding and confidence. Empathy, compassion, and being influential. It's about power and grace. So what happens when we're willing to listen and empathize is we kind of step in and now they're more willing for us to take them somewhere because they no longer have to defend their perspective. There is one thing we want to be careful about, however, and that is focusing on the problem and the past. If you're talking to someone about something that happened in the past, chances are they're going to remember it one way, you're going to remember it another, and it becomes a debate about who's right. So here is where the magic happens. This is what we've been leading up to all day long. Remember what we've learned about questions. Questions are the search engine for the brain. So if we want people to shift from their resistant brain to their receptive brain, the first thing we've got to know are what are the qualities and characteristics I'm going to bring to this conversation, no matter what they say, no matter what they do. Then I've got to have some idea of who they are at their best. What do I want to bring out? I want to listen and learn what's important to them. I want to let them know I get it. And then if I want them to go to the top of the mind, I've got to be willing to ask a top of the mind question. A top-of-the-mind question is almost always a question about the solution in the future, not about the problem in the past. One of my favorite top-of-the-mind questions I like to use with my kids and my employees and myself whenever we've made a mistake is, okay, knowing what you know now, how would you do that differently in the future? There's no blame in the future. There's no shame in the future. When I'm out there talking to CEOs and parents, one of the things they always tell me is they want their people to be more accountable, take more responsibility for their mistakes. But here's the problem. To people down the food chain, accountability means who's to blame if something goes wrong. And so since people don't want to be to blame, they resist being accountable. I like to change that around from accountability is our ability to be counted upon. Because I want to be able to be counted upon in an organization. But I don't want to have to be blamed and shamed as a way of doing that. So I'll tell you how this kind of top-of-the-mind situation came with my family. My son, who is now 28, it was about 11 years ago, he was about 17. It was about 2:30 in the morning. My wife, Georgia, and I were asleep in our room at 2:30 in the morning. We kind of thought Christopher was asleep in his room at 2:30 in the morning until we got a call from the police. We have your son handcuffed in the back of our police car. That's how they talk in Texas, by the way. Just so you know. You want to come get him? No. That was my first thought. Had this been the fourth time or the third time or even the second time, I might have said, nope, take him on downtown. Clearly he hadn't learned his lesson. But this was the first time Christopher had ever done anything like this. It really wasn't like him. So I just took a deep breath. All right, I'll come get him. So I got dressed, drove over. Of course, it's the middle of the night, so here are the police lights bouncing around. Here's Christopher handcuffed in the back of the police car. I talked to the policeman. They let him go. He got into the car. Guess what the first thing he said to me was when he got in the car? What's your guess? No. He said, Dad, can we just talk about how I'm going to do this differently in the future? Wouldn't that be great? If every time your kids or anybody who reports to you made a mistake, they came to you, they owned the mistake, they talked about what they've learned and how they're going to apply that learning to the future. That's what we're going for. The only time we can change behavior is in the future. But most of us have been taught to try to make someone feel really, really bad about what they did in the past so they don't do it again. That's almost like driving them down to the lower brain so that they make upper brain decisions in the future. It doesn't work. So we want people to be able to go to the top of the mind. There's one other thing that is a block that we want to make sure we don't do in order to be effective with people, and that is go to problem solving too soon. A lot of us do this because we don't have a lot of time. But the problem is, if you go to problem solving before someone has shifted from the problem brain to the solution brain, they're not going to be able to hear your solution, even if it's a great solution. So you want to know what you want to bring, you want to know what you want to bring out, find out what's important to them, let them know that you get it. Ask that top of the mind question, make problem solving the last step. When I try to go to problem solving and someone pushes back on me, that means I haven't really got what's important to them. So I'll go back to, I say, okay, I think I missed something. Tell me more about what's really bugging you here. And often they'll tell me something they didn't tell me the first time. They'll go a little bit deeper into what's really bothering them, and then I can begin to use that. So remember this quote from Albert Einstein, problems cannot be solved at the same level of awareness that created them. We want to make sure we are bringing the science of interpersonal neurobiology into the dealing with people. We want to make sure we have shifted to the top of the mind and we're taking 100% responsibility for staying there. And we're wanting them to shift from their resistant brain to the receptive brain. That's really what clarity, confidence, and creativity are all about. Until we are clear about who we are at our best and what we're trying to bring out in them, we can't really access our confidence and our creativity. So what I would encourage you to do is look at the blocks and ask yourself the question, in the past, when I've been in a conversation that didn't go as well as I would like it, were any of these blocks present? Did I find myself getting triggered? Was I trying to stop their negative behavior? Was I not really clear about what was important to them, or did they think that? Was I focusing on the problem in the past? Did I have a tendency to go to problem solving too soon? If so, now you know why it's just so easy to get caught in one of these cycles with these people, because it's just really easy to do that. So we want to make sure we know what we want to bring, know what we want to bring out, find out what's important to them, let them know we get it, ask the top of the mind question, and then go to problem solving. One of the things you can do when you're trying to frame a top of the mind question is ask yourself this: what do I want them to do differently, and how will that be good for them? I know how it'll be good for me. How will it be good for them? Or another way to put that, knowing what I want them to do, how will that fit with what's important to them? All right. So, by the way, there's a model in there that spells leap. I like my models to spell things. I call it the leap model because I think it's going to take a leap of faith for us to get good at this, because very few of us kind of grew up with this kind of communication model. There are also the 4 what's, what's important to them, what can we understand, what do we want them to do, and what question will get them to shift. So, here is the map for part 3. Remember, I want to give you a map for each part of the system. How do we get people to shift to their solution-focused brain? There's several things we've got to remember in order to pull this off. We've got to remember the lesson of the fist. so we're not trying to force them to change. We've got to remember the use stupid idiot rule, so we're not letting our frustration, our stress, our annoyance leak into our nonverbals. The one on the bottom left is the hardest one for people to remember. True vision is the ability to see in another more than they are showing you. We just have a tendency to only see their negative behavior, but now we know this is only who they are when they're coming from the lower 20% of the brain. And this is not the part of the brain we can change by addressing it. We want to make sure we have an image of who they are when they're coming from the upper brain. Got to be clear about what we want to bring, so we're not tying our peace of mind to their state of mind. We've got to be really clear about what we want to bring out. Who are they at their best? We want to make sure, we haven't got there yet. We want to make sure we listen and learn, find out what's important to them, that we empathize so they know we get it, so they no longer need to defend the righteousness of their perspective. We use and versus but to transition to the top of the mind question. You never want to go up to someone and say, well, okay, I hear what you're saying, but... That's like going up to a member of your family saying, you know, I really love you, but will negate anything that comes before it. You know, I hear what you're saying, and I'm curious to da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. You know, I really love you, and I'm wondering if we could da-da. Use and to transition to that top of the mind question, and that will tie what's important to them with what's important to you. And then you go to problem solving. So let's make sure we've talked about application here. Does it make sense that learning about what's happening in the brain and being able to see our being trapped in this cycle as good information about what's going on in the brain, and then using the brain model to shift from the lower brain to the upper brain, was that helpful? Good? Okay. Now the harder part is staying there. So what we got to do in order to stay there, and hopefully this has been helpful, is to make sure we recognize every thought, emotion, and action defines who we are. Make sure we have defined that, know the qualities and characteristics we're bringing to life, turn the problem into the practice field, make sure we are dealing with life in a way that makes it really important, our highest purpose, in a way that if it were being videotaped, it could be used as a training film for everybody in our organization and our life. Of course, if the answer to that is no, it's not that important, we're going to find ourselves trapped in the cycle. But if it's yes, we have access to the 4 criteria. We choose our perspectives very carefully, our perspective, interpretations, expectations, our piece of the pie. We start in the morning, reboot around lunchtime, reboot on the drive home. Was that helpful? Cool. Now, here's the really hard part, and that is getting other people to shift. So the idea is we want to make sure we're not letting our middle brain just paint their entire being as difficult. Want to recognize this is only who they are when they're coming from the lower brain, and make sure we have chosen the qualities and characteristics we are bringing to that conversation, and we're going to do that no matter what they say, no matter what they do. We're not going to tie our peace of mind to their state of mind. Because here's the thing, you probably know this, but there are some people you can do this with all day long and they will not change. There are just people who are so stuck in their brainstem that no matter what you do, they won't change. They're too frightened. But we don't want to tie our peace of mind to their state of mind. Remember what I asked you at the very beginning. Wouldn't it be cool if what you learned today allowed you to go into any situation in such a way that no one could stress you out, jerk your chain, rattle your cage? By the way, would you like to know how to keep people from jerking your chain? Don't give your chain to jerks. Now, who's a jerk and what's our chain? A jerk is someone who's stuck in the lower 20% of the brain. They're not always a jerk, but at that moment they're in the knee-jerk part of the brain. Our chain is looking to them for understanding or appreciation or validation. They can't give us that. They're not coming from the part of the brain that can give us that. So don't give them your chain. Only be vulnerable with people that you know really care about you and can trust you, that you can trust, and will take your chain very gently. I will give my wife my chain because I trust her and I can be vulnerable with her. But when I'm dealing with a difficult person, if they're in that lower 20% of the brain, I don't look to them for understanding or compassion. Would it be helpful if you had the entire system on one page? Kind of like a cheat sheet of sorts. This is what I have, and it's on photo paper. If you want one of these, and it's got the entire system on one page, it takes everything we've learned, puts it into one flow chart, just email me, Bill C. Ph.D., or just Google me. It'd be easier to go to the website and email me. And I will send you a PDF of this. If you get the PDF, it's like a 6.5 by 11. It's a little bit different, and I would encourage you to print it out on photo paper. The cool thing about the system is it is a 3-part system. If you ever wanted to fold along the dotted lines, you could put a little piece of tape there and put that on your desk and flip it to whatever part of the system you would like to access. So if that's something you're interested in, let me know, and I will be happy to do that. All right. Trying to get to these things here. Is there any questions you want me to answer from this list? Got about 9 minutes or so. Yes? Sleep one. Here's the thing with sleep. Yeah, how do we fall asleep and fall back asleep? Here's the problem with sleep. Have you noticed that whenever you're trying to fall asleep or you're trying to fall back asleep after waking up in the middle of the night, have you noticed our mind is racing with stuff? And it's generally not racing with wonderful, happy, loving thoughts. Have you noticed that? It's racing with something we're worried about. Guess what worry does? Remember the lemon. It triggers adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol. So we're laying there trying to go to sleep, producing chemicals that are designed to wake us up. We're producing the exact same chemicals we would be producing as if someone were breaking into our house. That's why we can't go back to sleep. So I suggest you use the brain model. You breathe and relax until you feel in control. Counting while you're doing it gives your brain something to do. Then you ask, B-R-A, you ask a top-of-the-mind question, always about the solution in the future. How would I rather be feeling? Sleepy, drowsy. Remember the lemon. Any image we hold in our mind produces a corresponding chemical effect in our body. So you imagine, B-R-A-I, you imagine a time in the past when you were feeling really sleepy and really drowsy, and you hit the pillow and fell asleep. That triggers melatonin. I could feel it happening when I was going through the thing. Melatonin is the chemical that puts us back to sleep. Then you notice a change. B-R-A-I-N, breathe, relax, ask, imagine, notice. At this point in the model, you will be feeling more sleepy, more drowsy. You just repeat the model until you've produced enough melatonin to put you back to sleep. But the reason it works is we're now laying there producing chemicals designed to put us back to sleep versus chemicals designed to wake us up. I do have a YouTube video called How to Fall Asleep and Fall Back Asleep if you wake up in the middle of the night, where I take you through that. Yes?
What about eating without gaining weight?
Eating without gaining weight, okay. Now, I just want to be very clear. I am not the weight police. I don't have a belief about how much someone should weigh. I just love food, and I love desserts, and I wanted to be able to eat in a way where I didn't gain weight. So I started looking at what goes on, and guess what? Most of us are eating too much food. Thank you very much. It's been a great seminar. I like that. But why are we eating too much food? Because we have learned to eat in a way that isn't natural. Babies eat in a natural way. A baby will only eat when he or she is hungry. So one of the keys of eating anything you want, anytime you want, and never gaining weight is you only eat when you're hungry. If someone says, I ate and I'm hungry an hour later, that's not hunger, that's boredom, that's something else. You can only be hungry when your stomach is empty. And frankly, the only time our stomach has the enzymes present to break the food down into energy is when it's empty. So we got to get comfortable or familiar with what hunger feels like. Now, most of us, some of us only eat when we're hungry, but we stop when we are full. There's a 20-minute lag between when your stomach is full and when your brain registers full. So if you stop eating when you're full, you have been eating for at least 20 minutes longer than your body needs. So here's what I do. Now you don't have to do it this way, but here's what I do. I use the exact same signal to stop eating that I use to start eating. I start eating when I'm hungry. I stop eating when I'm no longer hungry. That's not the same as full. So yesterday when I got here, I went across the street and I sat at this McCormick steak place or whatever's right across the street. It's really cool. And I ordered this chicken sandwich with French fries and a Coke because I love my chicken sandwiches with French fries and a Coke. And they brought it, and of course the fries are falling off the plates. There's thousands of fries. So what I did is started kind of eating the chicken in the chicken sandwich because I only eat the bread if it's good enough to eat all by itself. So I was eating that, having a few fries. After I'd eaten about 3/4 of the chicken and about 7 or 8 or 9 of the fries, I wasn't hungry anymore. And so I put it aside, and they came and went, oh my goodness, was there something wrong? I said, no, I just stop eating when I'm hungry. If you'll start practicing that, you can do that. Then guess what's right around the corner? An ice cream place. Oh my goodness. And it's like homemade ice cream. It's so good. You just go up there, turn the corner, Google it. It's called Crunch's Ice Cream. Thank you. So what I did is I went and they had this chocolate ice cream and I said, okay, I want a small scoop in a cup. Because normally they give you this way too much ice cream. And here's what I do when I'm going for dessert. Because you're no longer hungry, so you can't use hunger anymore. I use taste. I took the first bite of the dessert and I rate it from 1 to 10. If it's not a 10, don't keep eating. But frankly, most desserts are 10, so it's really not a problem. This ice cream was certainly a 10. And he put 2 or 3 scoops on there. I said, I really appreciate your being generous, but I only really want the top half. So he took the top 2 or 3 off and put it back in. Because I only knew exactly kind of what I wanted. So I took a bite of it. Oh, it was really good. I rated that as a 10. Take the next bite, rate that, but it won't be a 10 anymore. Your taste buds are starting to acclimate to the sweetness of the dessert. About a 9.5. Next bite will be about a 9. Next bite will be about an 8. When it gets down to a 6, that's when I stop eating, no matter how much dessert is left. So I ate most of the ice cream, got about halfway down to the cone, and then it just didn't taste the same. It was still good, but it didn't taste near as it did at the very beginning. That's when I stopped. I have found that if I can only eat when I'm hungry, stop when I'm no longer hungry, and stop when the dessert gets to a 6, I can eat anything I want, anytime I want, and never gain weight. So that's kind of what I do. Let me kind of wrap up, and if you have any other questions, feel free to ask me them because I love questions. I take questions as compliments. We started with this particular thing from Albert Einstein. Remember this at the very beginning? Problems cannot be solved at the same level of awareness that created. Hopefully we've raised our level of awareness today about what's going on. It's not difficult people, difficult situations making us feel a certain way. It's just data being sent to the wrong part of the brain. Good information. There's another quote that I love to use to end my seminars with. It's also from Albert Einstein, but I like it because most people wouldn't expect Albert Einstein to say this. He said, there are only 2 ways to live our life. One is if nothing is a miracle, and the other as if everything is. One as if difficult people, difficult situations make us feel the way they do. The other as if they provide a pretty miraculous opportunity to define ourselves on purpose. One as if there's no purpose in all the stuff we have to deal with, and the other as if purpose is all that matters. So we could call this new information on the science of dealing with stressed people in life. We could call this living and working on purpose. I like to call it life from the top of the mind. You guys have been great. Thank you for some time. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much.